We'll start with Chancellor Miner having a conversation with our panelists. And then as soon as Julian Guthrie, the New York Times bestselling author of Alpha Girls, is able to join us, she will. And we will have that conversation go till about 8 o'clock. And then we will have 10 to 15 minutes reserved for questions from the audience. So please save your questions till the end. We do want to hear from you. To submit questions, you will see the Q&A feature at the bottom of the screen. Please type in your questions there, and Judy will be able to pull them up, and she will ask as many questions as she can. Unfortunately, we're not able to do live questions, but we still want to hear from you through the Q&A feature. Another housekeeping tip is when I am talking, for example, if you want to promote my video, you can hover over the video and you will see 3 dots. And if you click on it, you can say pin video. And this gives the feeling as if we're in the same room having a conversation like we would if we weren't in these different and challenging times. And then the last thing I will share is, we have Supervisor Chavez also joining us by 7:30. I know she's on the flyer, so you may be, oh, she's here. Oh, hey.
I got early to listen.
Oh, and better. I was going to mention that you were going to be a little late, but perfect. So now to introduce Dr. Miner. Since 2015, she has been Chancellor of the Foothill-DeAnza Community College District, which is headquartered in Los Altos Hills. Over the past several years, Chancellor Miner has held offices at the regional, state, and national leadership group board of directors, expert advisor to HP, and the National Action Council for Minorities in Engineering, a member of the California Council on Science and Technology, and she was a member of a working group as part of President Obama's Council of Advisors on Science and Technology. She earned her Bachelor of Arts degree, summa cum laude, at Lone Mountain College in San Francisco, and later obtained her Master's and Doctor of Education from the University of San Francisco. And as you can imagine, this is just a small portion of Dr. Miner's very impressive resume and achievements. So Dr. Miner, thank you so much for moderating this very important conversation at a very important time in our history. And with that, I will turn it over to you. Thank you.
Lisa, thank you, and a thank you to our organizers and everybody who's attending tonight. It's certainly a pleasure for me to introduce our 5 highly accomplished panelists who will have an opportunity to tell their stories. I'd like to begin with Cindy Chavez, our Santa Clara County Supervisor. Supervisor Cindy Chavez is president of the Santa Clara County Board of Supervisors, representing more than 500,000 people in East, Central, and South San Jose. Her visionary policies include a substantial women's agenda that also focuses on future generations of young women in Santa Clara County. This August, we celebrated the 100th anniversary of women's right to vote. During the last 3 years, Board President Chavez mobilized women to use this anniversary as an opportunity to register women to vote and get accurate Census 2020 numbers. Before the pandemic hit, she organized a march through downtown to bring attention to the importance of the anniversary, now including women of color, and the equities that still exist. With an eye on future generations, Supervisor Chavez developed a voter pre-registration pilot program at more than a dozen local high schools to get students interested in elections and voting. Karitha Coleman, Director, C-suite executive, advisor, executive coach, community advocate, volunteer. Getting her start at Hewlett-Packard, Karitha has spent 40 years in the technology industry, working with startups and early stage ventures in the areas of organizational strategy development and executive coaching and effectiveness. Ms. Coleman is chairman of the board for Dignity Community Care and is a member of the boards of The Real Real and Veritas Learning. She is an advisor to Illuminate, an early-stage VC firm focused on enterprise, cloud, and mobile computing, as well as Launch with GS and Culture Shift. Her nonprofit interests center on work focused with underserved populations. She chairs the board of the Leverage Network, is a board member of KIPP schools in the Bay Area, a national board member of Facing History and Ourselves, and on the advisory board of the Black Economic Alliance. Monica Mallon, Youth Climate Change Leader. Monica is a graduate of San Jose State and is a youth leader of the Silicon Valley Youth Climate Action Transit Team. She is also a member of the Cambrian Community Council and Silicon Valley Transit Users. Over the past few years, she has focused on advocating for more sustainable transportation options in Santa Clara County. Connie Martinez, Executive Director, Silicon Valley Creates. Connie Martinez has been a civic entrepreneur and community strategist in Silicon Valley for over 30 years, having held several civic leadership positions in organizations ranging from the City of Mountain View to Joint Venture Silicon Valley to Children's Discovery Museum to UC Santa Cruz. She is the co-founder of Spur San Jose, the School of Arts and Culture at Mexican Heritage Plaza, and First Act Silicon Valley. She also serves on the board of the Monterey Bay Aquarium and is currently CEO of Silicon Valley Creates, a not-for-profit organization on a mission to accelerate our creative culture. As venture culturists, Silicon Valley Creates invest in a portfolio of over 100 arts organizations and 150 artists, publishes content magazine, and produces conferences and events that build the capacity of our arts ecosystem. Dr. Shyamali Singhal, Director, El Camino Hospital Cancer Center. Shyamali Singhal earned her undergraduate degree in biophysics at Johns Hopkins University and her MD and PhD in molecular pharmacology at Albert Einstein College of Medicine. She went on to complete a fellowship in surgical oncology at the City of Hope National Cancer Center, where her research there focused on discovering the interactions of chemotherapy and a wide spectrum of natural agents and the impact on liver function. In 2005, she became the medical director for the cancer program at El Camino Hospital. More recently, she has been involved in medical device startups and digital health. She serves as the Chief Medical Officer for Circadia Health and is the primary investigator for several clinical trials, including a biobank with the Canary Center at Stanford. We're going to hear each of these amazing alpha girls in their own right tell their stories. And we'll go in alphabetical order. So I'm going to invite Supervisor Cindy Chavez to start us off with the story of her own journey.
Well, thank you. I'm not going to tell a story of a journey. That isn't going to happen in 1 minute. But what I did want to say is how excited I am to be here with all of you. And I was thinking a lot about just the moment we're in and recognizing that as I look back on my own career, that I benefited so much from women of goodwill looking out for me and helping me find my path. And I'm sitting here with all of you tonight, extremely grateful and really looking forward to our discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy. Karitha Coleman.
Hi, good evening. It's wonderful for all of you to make time this evening to be here. And I would have to echo both what Cindy said, as well as Nisa, in reference to the celebration, the wonderful celebration that we as women have before us at this point in time. And I think it's a celebration, but it can't go without saying that it also increases our responsibility as women in our community and in our nation to ensure that we are lifting up not just each other, but we're lifting up our dear Kamala Harris as she takes on this role. One of the great things that, I mean, she said a lot of wonderful things in her speech, but I think I also saw a caption in a newspaper article where she was walking away from the field, and the caption was basically, keep your shoes on because we're walking on a lot of glass, because she is breaking that glass structure for us. The other thing that I want to say is it was so great that I am sharing this evening with many women who I have come to know throughout my own journey here in Silicon Valley, Nisa being one of them, but of course Cindy Chavez and Connie. You know, our paths cross in different ways, and I think you'll hear some of that tonight, because I think that's part of the thing that we certainly as women professionals need to pay attention to. And even Shyamali, haven't seen you in a very long time, but we've gotten to know each other over the years as well. So I am looking forward to this conversation.
Thank you, Karitha. Monica.
Hi, so yeah, like everyone else, it's really hard to tell my story in just a minute, but I guess really to summarize it is really to say that I'm involved now and I'm considered a young leader now because of everyone that came before me and because of everyone that inspired me along the way. You don't just wake up one day and decide that you want to change things, get out there and do it in an instant. It really takes time, and you really have to develop these skills. And even today, I still make mistakes and I still fail. And, you know, it's really important to learn from those mistakes and have mentors that you look up to that can help you along the way. And, you know, really just know that it's a journey, it's a process. There's ups and downs. There's going to be failures, there's going to be successes. And the one thing that you can really control is learning from your experiences and passing on what you learn to future generations.
Thank you. Connie Martinez.
Thank you, Judy. Oh, am I on? Yes. Can you hear me? Good. So I think almost everyone has talked about mentors, and I will share a little story just to remind everybody how far we've come. One of my great mentors was Becky Morgan, and she's a dear friend. She said to say hi to you, Judy, and Cindy, and Karitha. She saw the lineup, and she reminded, we had lunch today, and she was on the floor of the Senate in 1986. And was the first woman to wear a pantsuit on the floor, and it made national news.
Wow.
Can you believe it? It made national news. And that pantsuit is actually in a museum somewhere in Sacramento. I'm looking at you, Cindy. How far we've come. And so, you know, I think we're going to be having a few questions. And one of the questions that was posed was, what does it take to sort of break out and do well and compete, quite frankly, in the, you know, a male-dominated world, and clearly in Silicon Valley, that is the truth. And I think it depends on the sector you're from. So my experience, and you read off our bios, so we don't have to repeat that, is in local government. I think that there is an opportunity for women. I've been in local government. I didn't feel that the big differences between how men and women were treated necessarily. But what I did notice and observed over the years is that what sets most women apart, sometimes we're smarter, sometimes not, is that we work harder. Women work harder, period. And I do think that's one of the critical success factors. And then I think, you know, as in leadership, we require the same things that men are required of leadership. I think it starts with integrity. So people follow people they believe in, trust, admire, and respect. So it starts with integrity. And then the next thing is vision. And leaders take people to a new place. We have to articulate a better place, and that's what leadership and vision is about. And because it's a new place, I think we all have to have courage. And I think women have to have an extra dose of courage, given the challenges that we face in the various industries we're from. And then lastly is competency. And so, but the key ingredient is hard work. And I really think that's what sets women apart. Let's see, I think you'll ask us some more questions, Judy. So I think we're going short to begin with, and then we'll circle back with some questions. So that'll be great. Thank you.
And you timed it well. Julian is here, and so I'd like to just offer Shyamali a chance to make a few remarks, and then I will introduce Julian and ask her a few questions before we open it up to the panel. So Shyamali.
Oh, thank you so much. You know, it's a real honor for me to be part of this panel of these very distinguished women that have accomplished a lot and so much to teach us. I think what I would say in the short form is that it's a little on the lines of what Madeleine Albright says, is women have to help women, and we have to lift each other up, and we have to see potential, and we have to see promise in the younger generation, and we have to make room for those people to be part of our collection. So when we do things, it's not for us to stand out, it's for us to bring other people along. And so I would leave that as just a thought. I do have a story to share with you, but I'll save that for later, and I'd be really interested to hear what Ms. Guthrie has to say.
Wonderful. Well, Julian, we are so happy you were able to enter the room. And I want to tell everybody that you are the founder and CEO of Mindset Alpha, a tech startup enabling companies to better attract, retain, and support women and allies. Julian is the founder of a national nonprofit, the Alpha Girls Institute, which supports and connects high school girls across the U.S. She's the author of 5 books, including 2 national bestsellers. Her book, Alpha Girls, is described as Hidden Figures meets the Social Network and is being adapted for television. Julian, welcome. We are so happy to have you with us tonight.
I am too. You know, there are always barriers, and this was a little technological snafu, but we persist and prevail, right?
That's right. That's right. A hallmark of an alpha girl.
Yes, absolutely.
So, Julian, before the publication of Alpha Girls in 2019, a Google search would have taken you to a 2013 horror film about a sorority paying a rather gory price for some badly managed satanic rituals. So on behalf of women everywhere, thank you for creating a much more substantive and inspiring narrative under that title. I have to say, as I read Alpha Girls, I found myself experiencing such a wide range of emotions, and I attribute that to your expert telling of the 4 women's stories against the backdrop of Silicon Valley history. I mean, talk about the good, bad, and the ugly. You captured it. Please share some of what you wrote in your author's note about what drew you to the 4 Alpha Girls you ultimately selected to be the focus of your book.
Well, I love that you noticed. You're the only one who's noticed. Like if you Googled Alpha Girls, you know, up came, I think I saw maybe there was like a wrestling group, there was the horror flick, and, you know, all jokes aside, it is, you know, I love the idea of the words Alpha Girls, this juxtaposition of girls with strength and kind of reclaiming that strength. And you know, it's really, there's a serious story within that, and that is, you know, we have over 3,500 years of recorded history, and 0.5% has been dedicated to the stories of women, and we need to take back those stories, and we need to empower even common words, you know, even thinking about the word alpha, think about the word ambition, think about the word charisma. And, you know, why are those words different by gender? They should be, you know, gender neutral in my mind. But so thank you for noticing that. And now when you type in Alpha Girls, I hope that Alpha Girls, the book, soon to be the TV show, comes up first. And all of these trailblazing stories, you know, reclaiming these stories, owning our stories, telling the stories of other women. So coming up with the 4 women, of course, there are Alpha Girls on this panel. There are Alpha Girls of all ages and all industries. I zeroed in on these 4 primary characters. This is nonfiction, of course, but they're definitely characters. And I try to write, as you alluded to, in a very novelistic way. And I really love the individual women, but I think they make for a very beautiful, powerful tapestry together. They are powerful in their differences. Whether it is their backstories, coming from Jakarta, Indonesia, or coming from Istanbul, Turkey, or from, the South in the United States, or the Midwest, and they all find their way to Silicon Valley and try to make their names in this industry that was decidedly stacked against them. So, Teresa, their investment methodologies also were different, the companies that they invested in, and really some of the foremost companies of our day, but their stories, again, going back to story, were largely untold. So I like their differences. I like that they arrived in Silicon Valley in different times, had different investments, companies that they nurtured and brought to life. It showed their differences. It showed their humanity, and they were just like the rest of us, and they persevered and they found ways to succeed in this male-dominated industry. I also wanted to tell with Alpha Girls their personal stories, the downfalls, the pitfalls, the barriers, the betrayals. And so again, there were differences there, but taken together, I think there's someone within the story who you can relate to maybe more than the others. And I think there's that case for everyone, with each individual character identifying, I identify with Teresa, or I identify with Magdalena. But they're powerful women who prevailed and did something amazing. And, their stories had been largely untold.
Well, you tell them beautifully. And for anybody who has not read the book, you absolutely must get it. I thought one of the most memorable lines in Alpha Girls is the Melinda Gates quotation, "If venture didn't diversify, tech couldn't diversify." So what kind of progress is tech making in diversity, equity, and inclusion? And what impact might we see from recent California legislation such as 826 and SB 979 that require seats now for women and persons from underrepresented communities on certain kinds of corporate boards?
Well, so great questions. We could spend a couple of hours on that, but for the sake of brevity, and I want to hear from the other esteemed panelists here. So when I got into reporting for the story, a couple of data points really stood out for me. One was that 94% of all check writing venture capitalists were men, and only 2% of venture dollars went to women-founded companies. So I was really struck by those really dramatic numbers. But the 94% male made me think, well, there are 6% who are female, and who are they? And how did they do this? And did they love their job, like their job, hate their job? And it was so important to me because, venture capitalists and entrepreneurs are really creating these next generation companies that impact how we all live. And that's why I wanted to go almost to the start of the food chain, if you will. The entrepreneurs have to have the ideas, but in many cases in these startups, you need the funders. And there is, as we all know, a similarity or affinity bias. And so it was this old boys club, and there are a lot of great men in Silicon Valley, and there are many in the book, but they were hiring and funding men who looked very much like themselves. So we didn't have the diversity of ideas. And there was very little representation among the founders and the funders. So as far as progress, where we are today, there is definitely progress. The narrative of the women of Alpha Girls is a very empowering one and inspiring one. And that is, there were ups, there were downs, like all of our lives. There were kind of universal interventions in their lives when something bad happened, when they were betrayed, but it made them think about what was good and what was bad and what needed to change. And they became galvanizing forces for other women, so that women who came after them, women of today who are coming up in this industry, would not be so isolated and would not be so alone. So they've created these sisterhoods, these networks, these investing platforms. There's the political arm, that is bringing more attention to women in this industry. I think the reference to the legal mandates are really interesting to watch. I think that they have been effective when little else has worked to get more women on boards. And, I know there's a legal challenge now to some degree, but I think that, it's been very positive. And the principal reason, two things. One is that a lot of board positions were filled by CEOs. So there was a pipeline. And we know that, so few women, I think 5% of, CEOs are women, very, very low numbers. So you're just, you have a very limited pool to draw from if that's the only place that is your pipeline. So now this is forcing companies, public companies in California, to go outside that CEO pipeline and find really talented women, but maybe who come from a different channel. So I think that that is actually a positive thing in the state, and it was not happening otherwise. And I know other states are also looking and following suit. So I think we're going in the right direction. I think the world is looking. I think that, and I'm sorry if I missed this earlier, when you have Kamala Harris going on stage and saying, I may be the first, but I will not be the last. That is what is happening. So you have, more diversity, more representation. You're going to have more women bringing other women on boards. And we know, bottom line, profitability, you can think of these moves as, is it about equity? Is it about doing what's right? Because this is what's right. This is what's moral. That is what is equitable. Or you can look at it as, this is what is the most profitable. And we know that study after study shows the more diverse your companies are, and we're talking here specifically about women, the more profitable, the more effective your companies will be. So there's progress, definitely. In California, but still, half of all companies in the United States have zero diversity and inclusion programs. A stunning fact.
Well, you continue to be a phenomenal champion of empowering girls and women with a focus on underrepresented communities. So you have to tell us about the 5,000 interviews you conducted and what you were then inspired to do.
So it did feel like I conducted 5,000 interviews after I did all these interviews for the book. And I talked to at least more than that. I talked to probably 6,000 people after Alpha Girls came out. And I kept hearing the same thing from CEOs who want to do better, from men who also want to do better. How can I be a better ally? There are a lot of great men out there who, want to, whether you're a dad or a grandpa or a CEO or a colleague or a friend or a brother, who are asking, how can I be a better ally? How can I be a better advocate, a better champion? And then women were really gravitating to the stories of others who have succeeded in male-dominated industries. And I saw a great opportunity in the market to create a company that answers all of those questions. So I went out myself 3 months ago, and I devised my business plan, and I did my PowerPoint, and I redid it 31 times. And I pitched my heart out. And it was a very interesting experience. And I closed my Series C fundraising round last month. So now I'm officially launching my company. Thank you, yay. So, and really thinking about all of these things that I've been championing and how we can live that, whether in our intern program we're building up the college level or at all levels, representation, voices, diversity of voices, and living that with integrity and hoping to make a dent in the universe with continued storytelling, but now through a tech company. I feel very blessed to have the opportunity to do this.
That's fantastic. So my last question before going to again, the other alpha girls on the call here. Given the historic election of Kamala Harris, what other opportunities might open or accelerate for women as you think about the future unfolding?
Well, the saying that we all know, you can't be what you can't see. the more we can see, the more visibility that we have, the more stories that we tell, you know, of women across industries of all types, from all walks of life. I don't care whether you are, you know, a CEO, or you are a welder, or you are working in construction or architecture, or, you know, whatever it is. We want to tell your stories. We want to find ways to help you succeed and celebrate that. So I feel very, very optimistic that we are at a place in time when the world is looking and embracing social justice like never before. And I also think this is a critical time, and I'll end my part on this, where we do have a crisis that we all need to focus on, and that is women leaving the labor force because of the demands that we have all endured under COVID by degree. And you look at the labor statistics for September, 860,000 women left the workforce compared to 216,000 men. 1 in 4 women now say they're thinking of leaving their jobs. So we need to be there for women like never before, whether you are a friend, whether you are, you know, a child of, whether you are the employer. This is a mission critical right now. So that there's optimism, but there's this reality too, which needs to be addressed, and that is very right now. So crisis and opportunity, and I believe that in crisis there is opportunity.
Well, Julian, thank you so much for sharing these insights. You conclude your book by saying there are alpha girls everywhere and their stories need to be told. And thank you by actually ending with the request to all of us that we make sure alpha girls, past, present, and future, get their place in the history books. And certainly our panelists tonight all deserve to be in the history books. I'm going to go back to Shyamali because she, I think, teased us with the promise of a story. And so, Shyamali, why don't you begin this part of our discussion with, you know, your story, the challenges, the successes. There's so much you have. You have an amazing story. Just, you know, the brief bio that we had of you, I know I could have gone on for days just talking about that pathway, but do share with us the story that you promised. Oh, and are you muted? Yes, let's get you off mute. There you, oops.
Okay, I'm on. All right.
Yeah.
One of the things that we often think is that our careers are described as straight lines, but they don't really go as straight lines. And opportunity presents itself in different places. I was headed in medical school to bench to bedside, which means you take drugs out of the lab and you make products and you take care of patients. Well, I did my PhD, I studied drugs, I studied pharmacology, and then when I went back to medical school, I wasn't really so keen on seeing patients in clinic and being a medical doctor. The part that I liked was surgery, and I liked surgery, and I'm a surgeon now, but I liked surgery, and I liked the intensity of it, I liked the drama of it, I liked the ability to fix, and so I told my program director and I told everybody that I wasn't going to go to Harvard the way that everybody wanted me to go to Harvard, and I was going to go and do surgery, which was not what MD PhDs do. And I ended up at the University of Washington and did my general surgery. You know, same thing what other general surgeons do. We did heart surgery, we did transplant, we did all these kind of amazing things. And I decided at the end of it to do surgical oncology. Did a fellowship at City of Hope. And then at the end of what appeared to be 19 years of training, I got married, I had a baby, and when it was trying to make decisions for a family as opposed to just me, I couldn't take the job that I had been offered, which was at the University of Washington, because my family didn't have a place there. We had to come back to the Bay Area where our families were, and I looked for a job. I was at Stanford, I was at UCSF, and when I had gone up to UCSF to talk with the then chair of the Cancer Center to see if they would hire me to be a part of their faculty. I had a long conversation with this lady, and she talked to me, looked at what I had done, looked at my research, looked at all this stuff. And at the end of it, she said, you know, it's really too bad you have not accomplished anything in your life, and you really need to go back to the drawing board and start over and figure out what it is that you need to do with yourself, because clearly you haven't accomplished anything. And so I took that, and of course I was completely flabbergasted. You know, here I was thinking, oh, well, you know, I have 4 degrees. I went to a fellowship that only takes 30 people in the country. I feel like I've done pretty good. And I went home and cried my eyes out. And I thought, oh, this is really hard. How am I ever gonna get a faculty job? How am I ever gonna do this thing? And so my husband, who's a startup guy, he said, you know, screw them. You know, they don't need you and you don't need them. So why don't you just start your own thing? And I said, you know, you have got to be kidding me. No one goes and hangs out their shingle and starts a cancer center anywhere. Like, you don't just start your own hospital and your own thing. He said, no, I really think that you should go talk to the community hospital people and see if they need somebody of your skill set. So I made an appointment with Ann Fife, who is the VP of Business Development at El Camino Hospital. And I talked to her on the phone, and then I met her in person. And, you know, mind you, I was 38 years old. I hadn't finished my fellowship. I had not one day of business experience at all, okay? And she said, okay, well, why don't we hire you to build a cancer program, since we don't have one at El Camino Hospital? And I went home and I had to think about it. I said, well, what do I know about building a cancer center? Well, apparently nothing. And so I sat down and I thought to myself, well, if I had a clean slate of what I've seen in the world, what would I do? And I just wrote it down on a piece of paper. And I said, oh, I needed this, I needed that, I need a other thing. I've been at 3 hospitals and multiple other ones, and I know what I liked, I know what I didn't like, and I wrote it down. So I got hired in November 1st of 2005. We wrote a set of business plans, which everyone would laugh at. We had 6 pages, and we got funded by the hospital board $10 million to build our cancer center.
That's awesome.
6 pages. And so in 2005, and I wrote this set of business plans. My husband looked at it. You know, we caught all different mistakes, all different this, that, the other thing, budgets and whatever. So we built the first set. And in 2005, we had 700 new patients per year, which is not very much, okay? And all of them were going outside instead of staying within our community. In 2020, we have 2,500 new patients per year, which is about 2/3 the size of City of Hope. And all those patients are staying in our community, and we've taken good care of them because we did what was on basic principles, which was bring the services to the patient and take care of the patients like they're your family. And that's it, okay? It was a simple mission, right? Just to take care of patients. And so I would tell you the story, and the reason I tell you this is that there's a story of 2 women, right? There's a woman who enabled, and there's a woman enabled. I asked her a bunch of years later, I said, you've got to be kidding me. Why did you hire me? because, you know, based on a piece of paper, generally speaking, you wouldn't hire somebody who had no experience to do this job. And she said, well, I liked your message, and you did not know that you couldn't do that thing. And that's why she hired me, because I didn't know. I didn't know that it was an insurmountable task. And
so many lessons that you have to offer. Thank you so much for that.
And I would give you one other piece of advice, which many of you who are not surgeons would take away, is that there are crises in the world, but no one's actually bleeding to death. So barring that somebody's bleeding to death, it's not that bad of a crisis, and it can be handled. And you have time to think, and you have time to do.
Well, thank you again for sharing all of that. Karitha, I wanted to go to you next. You certainly have so many talents that you have taken to so many different venues. Tell us about all of that and what has led you to so much diversity in the way you are in the world and the different groups that you're helping.
Thanks, Judy. First, I wanted to just say a couple of things about what Shyamali had to say, because you know, really a part of your story pointed out how important it is to have people who believe in you, like your husband, and other women, like the woman who did support you and really encouraged you to do what she felt you could do and was willing to take a chance on you. We all need that. And I think some of us said that in the beginning, is that we really need to help raise each other up. And I think that that's very critical. One of the other things that I was thinking about, as actually several of you were talking earlier, including Julian, is that, you know, you can have so many, we all have so many different experiences, and there's so many jewels that we can take from each of those experiences, whether they were good or bad, right? Whether we landed in places where we felt like, okay, what am I doing here? And you try to make the best of the situation or decide to move on. But regardless, it's an experience in and of itself. And I think really we're probably all sum totals of those experiences, and I'm not any different. And, you know, from being raised in Massachusetts as a kid, born to a mixed race family. My father was Black, my mother was Japanese, and in Massachusetts, where for me, it was probably one of the more segregated places that I could grow up, because everybody spends a lot of time trying to understand, what are you? You look different. And that's not just about color, it's about your nationality, it's about the way you talk, it's about where you live, it's about your economic circumstances, it's about your religion in a big way. And so I went to Catholic schools for 12 years, being the only person who looked like me for 12 years. And I always felt like I had to explain that. And I, from a very young age, because of the way I was brought up in that circumstance, and with my parents who really had a hard time even communicating with one another effectively, because my father didn't speak Japanese. He married a woman in Japan and brought her to this country. And so they had to sort of learn how to get to know each other. And what I found is that they spent a lot of time trying to figure each other out. And I knew at a very young age that I wanted to do something about that communication is a very, it's actually a very difficult thing to do. You can talk, but really communicating, understanding each other, putting your point across to the other person is very, very difficult. And I actually think that's why I ended up starting my career in human resources, because I really always felt that communication, and still do today, is sort of the key to everything. And when I ended up in tech, which was a wonderful gift for me, and started at Hewlett-Packard, which was even a better gift for me. It was a big bonus in terms of learning about culture and values, and how important that is, and living your best self within your own integrity. I think that's so important. You know, they're each experiences that I sort of took along the way, and I won't go through all of them because there's just too much ground to cover. But, you know, who knew that I would find myself, after being in tech, in healthcare, and in healthcare that is faith-based, in Catholicism. I mean, I just never, ever would have anticipated that. And it wasn't one of those things, you know, you were talking about how it's not a straight line. Very seldom is a straight line, but I actually think that it makes it a much more interesting journey. And when I went to the board of Dignity Health, which now is the largest nonprofit healthcare organization in the United States, I never anticipated that I would be board chair of that organization, which was then 16 billion in revenue, with 50,000 employees. I mean, I just felt like, hey, this is a great thing to do. I love the people. I loved the mission of providing healthcare to underserved communities, which is right in my sweet spot of working with underserved communities and people of color, right? It just sort of came to me. I was in the right place at the right time with the right set of circumstances and a little bit of luck. But that has also been a gift to me, because I spend most of my waking hours right now with people of color who are all over the country, who actually now, as has been shown through COVID, right, are disproportionately impacted by different health issues, COVID being one of them. But the Black community, definitely, there are so many health issues that plague our community that I never really understood. And as a board member of this organization, I actually get to ask those questions. I get to ask about, how and why, and if we have a diversity statement, what does that mean? And how does it show up in terms of the way that we value and evaluate the people that we have in our communities, and how people are held accountable. So I don't know if that answers your total question, but I could go on for hours, so I'm going to stop there.
Well, clearly we could go on for hours, but thank you for making those choices, because you really are serving underserved communities with the work that you have chosen. And I want to go to Connie next, because you've certainly held a lot of positions in civic leadership, and then there you are in the arts. And I think we'd all love to know, how did you get there?
So like so many of the stories we're hearing tonight, and by the way, I'm incredibly inspired by all of these wonderful women, is that it was a circuitous route. Partly, sometimes issues choose you, or opportunities choose you, and it's whether or not we seize them. So I call myself an accidental arts leader. I started out in my career with an MBA, and like many MBAs who don't know that much actually, because they have little experience, go into management consulting, right? And then I ended up in local government, and that was somewhat of a coincidence as well. And kind of being in that state of greenness, always kind of on the edge of greenness, and which is stimulating and exciting. And I think Julian referenced that in some of her comments earlier. And so the truth about how I got into the arts is that I came down with breast cancer. I had breast cancer. Now it's, I think, over 20 years ago. And I was working for the University of California at that time, and slogging through the process of opening up the center at Moffett Field, which is now, I think you've heard some of that with the UC Santa Cruz. And in the academic world, Judy, you'll appreciate this, things take time, right? They take time and lots of process. And so when you get diagnosed with a life-threatening disease, you look at time differently. And just at that moment, a couple of my American Leadership Forum classmates, I know some of you are from ALF or in the audience as well, they convinced me, and I was literally just finishing up chemo, to apply for the Children's Museum. I don't even know, I'm looking at you, Cindy, I don't even know if you know this story. I'd never been in the Children's Museum. But they were really looking for somebody who knew the community and had the leadership skills they wanted. Anyway, long story short, you walk into the Children's Museum, it's happy, it's, the people were incredible, the children are, inspiring, and I'm just coming off of a life-threatening disease, and I said, wow, this is such a happy place. How hard could this be? Well, friends, leading a cultural institution in Silicon Valley is really hard, but it's also incredibly rewarding and exciting and fun. And you have the nonprofit heart, but you also have to have the business acumen. And so that's how I got into the cultural sector. And from there, I just continued to, start new ventures. First Act Silicon Valley and now SV Creates. And our whole focus is to take the sort of venture cultural model into the funding and capacity building of our ecosystem. So that's my answer.
That is fabulous. And again, how lucky we are that you are in there doing all that amazing work in the arts ecosystem. We have to make sure we never forget about the arts.
Yes. And by the way, Cindy is one of my key partners. I have to say that out loud. Thank you, Cindy, for your leadership.
Nice.
And support.
So Monica, as you hear these stories of so many individuals who've been in the workplace a lot longer, what about your own path going forward? What do you think the future might hold for you? And have you changed your major over time? Are you finding that there's some opportunities that have found you that you might not have thought about?
Yeah, I mean, in college, I graduated recently. I studied public relations and political science. I was kind of planning on doing communications or PR and working for an agency, but then I kind of fell into transit advocacy because of a job that I had at San Jose State working in their transportation and management department. And my boss was someone that really inspired me to get more involved, and I sort of somehow kind of became this transit advocate here, and then kind of one of the more prominent transit advocates in this county. And it all kind of happened without me really realizing it. And after I graduated, I got offered another job also in this industry, so I kind of just fell into it and didn't really expect this to happen. But really in the future, I really want to build a new generation of leaders, because when I started getting involved, there was really not a lot of activity. One of the reasons why I was able to stand out is because nobody was really doing anything. And I decided to do something, and I got a lot of attention for that pretty quickly, especially because I was young and mobilizing other young people. So something that's really important to me is showing young people that they can create change and that they can be involved, especially for the industry that I'm in. A lot of people are really intimidated by it because it's complicated and sometimes it's confusing, and there's a lot of political connotations to everything that you do. But I think that if you really get people involved at an early age and emphasize that it's okay to fail and it's okay to not know what's happening or what to do, and that it's important to reach out for help when you need it, and learn from failure, learn from mistakes, and just really they can do this, and that it's not something that's impossible and only for older people. I'm the youngest person where I work by 10 to 20 years. Everybody has a lot more experience, and it can be really intimidating as a young person when you don't know anything. And that's the situation that I was in when I came into all this. I really didn't have a lot of experience. I really didn't have a lot of knowledge. But, I was really excited to learn and read everything I could and asked a lot of questions. And, it's really a process. I think a lot of people act like, I just instantly downloaded all of this information from something magical. But that's not really true. We all struggle and we all go through a journey and we all go through a process. And, really showing that side of it and showing those hard moments and, admitting when I'm struggling even to this day is something that I think is really important. Because
Monica, you are an incredible example to us, and I think I speak for everybody when we say we are inspired by you. So you stick with it and continue to be that model. And I am sure there are any number of people, both older and younger than you, who are looking to you and saying, I want to be like Monica. So you keep up that wonderful work. Cindy Chavez, I definitely would like to kind of wrap up this portion before we check to see if there's some questions. But, just given everything that you've heard, What are you feeling and thinking today? I mean, there's so much that has happened, and what an amazing panel we've been able to hear from tonight. So let me just let you go with your thoughts wherever they take you.
Well, sir, first I wanted to say it's hard to come after the youngest person in the room by 20 years. But Monica, we have confidence and faith that you are going to change the world, and no pressure, but we're going to have your back. And Ms. Guthrie, I wanted to tell you, your book was really, really, it was a powerful read, and I'm excited that more people are going to get access to it. I think the thing that I'm really thinking about today is going to sound a little bit pessimistic, and I'm actually not a pessimist. I like all of you, think a lot about, I think less about what can't be done and more about what can be done every day. But I want to start with something that Ms. Guthrie said when she pointed out that less than 0.5% of all stories ever historically written have been written about women. And a couple of years ago, I brought forward a request to my colleagues to put forward $5 million to tell the stories of women in our community using the arts and trying to get matching grants from other public entities. And it is the second most amount of hate mail I've gotten was over that. And the reason was from women primarily saying, why wouldn't you spend that to help victims of domestic violence or rape crisis? And what I wrote back to them is, in fact, we've done just that. We increased the amount of money we were spending to fight domestic violence. We invested money in rape crisis centers. We are the first county in the country to process every rape kit under 30 days. And that is all work that I led. And so to me, the fact that we were still thinking small ball, right? That we're still thinking that the pie is this big and we only get access to this much of it, tells me that one of the reasons I'm most excited about Vice President Harris is because it gives us an opportunity writ large to say, no, the pie is this big. And the real question is, what do we want to do with this pie, not with this pie? So I feel really encouraged and enthusiastic because that's what her vice presidency means to me. And frankly, the book and listening to all of you, we got to grow the pie. And then we have to not be afraid to take the slice we need for the things we think are priorities. So I'm very excited and very sounded pessimistic, but I'm optimistic. And I guess I just would say to all the women here, I know none of you need to be told that this is a time to dig in and just move as hard and fast as we can.
Great. We do have a few questions, and so I am going to challenge you to come up with some answers to, let's see, it looks like we've got maybe 4 questions here in the 10 minutes that we, in fact, we're going to allot more or less. We might be running a little over, but so the first question, what is the best way to find mentors? Who'd like to offer an answer to that one?
I would say just briefly that sometimes the word mentorship can be daunting for people. I like sponsorship slightly better, but I think the whole point is that make yourself useful to the person who you want to help you. So bring something to the table where it's not just a one-way street. If someone comes to me and says, I would love to intern with you. I have so much to learn from you. That's all fantastic. But if someone comes to me and says, I love to write, I love to do video interviews, I love to blog and vlog, and I'd love to contribute. These are my story ideas. I have 5 story ideas. Then it's a two-way street, and we both are getting something out of it. So I would just say, whether it's mentorship or sponsorship or seeking allies, seeking guidance in an industry, bring something useful to that relationship where you're also helping the other person out. And like with Monica and her youth, youth is such an asset to companies. It's a different perspective. It's an important perspective. I love hearing from, a new group of interns that we have, and just the different perspectives. Again, it's different voices. So that would be my recommendation for not finding, but landing a mentor.
Julian, thank you. How about this next question? How do we encourage high school girls to plan their college programs to be leaders?
Yeah, I mean, I'll jump in on that. Actually, no, go ahead, doctor. You.
Oh,
Please,
so
Firebox, go ahead.
I have been working, so I have 8 students that work with me on various projects, and they've come, they've talked about what they're interested in doing, and again, they're very proactive kids. Like, they've reached out to me to do various things, and so we have these different groups of kids that are now changing practice at the hospital. They're working on different policies and procedures and things like that, and when they look at what they've accomplished, then they're more likely to leap forward. And they have people around them that are doing just that for them. And so some of it's by having people who are ahead of them that are showing them how. Because I think there isn't a lack of wanting. There might be a lack of knowing how to get that accomplished. And so my daughter went to a SAGES program at Stanford, where women physicists are showing them in a week what they do, but they also have weekly calls with these girls and really encourage them on a very nitty-gritty, you know what, this is how you do it.
Thank you. Why don't I go to one more question, and that one is, what can women do to organize for post-pandemic recovery, given the many pressures in our progress, from attacks on reproductive rights to our workforce participation suddenly needing to be balanced with our family responsibilities?
So I'll take a swing at this one. I mean, I think that, you know, one of the things that I think we have a great opportunity is to actually make some really significant policy changes that address what women need. What we know is that if you are a woman who makes less than $40,000 a year, you are more likely to be unemployed right now than if you are a man who makes anything above 70,000. And part of the reason for that is that we don't have stable childcare in this country. We don't have stable access to childcare. And when all the recovery bills went forward, there was no money for childcare that came through. And I think that's a reflection of not having enough women in leadership. So I'm gonna just say I think there may be other ideas, but I think what we have to think about is, how do we prioritize our needs as if we understand and believe that we really are equal.
And I would also just add to that very quickly that, you know, the second shift is very, very real. And the amount of work that full-time working women do, even when they have a full-time working spouse, partner, is, you know, more than double that. So women are doing too much of the, you know, of the so-called unpaid work. And so 2 things, partners, spouses, significant others, do more, help out more. And women, we need to be better at both asking for help. Sometimes we're not good at that because it's easier just to do it ourselves. Ask for help, and then I feel like there is power in being vulnerable and in just saying, I need help. Extend your hands, I need help today. And I need you to do this. And then really letting that go. Don't nitpick, don't just let your partner take care of that. So, so 2 areas. We women take responsibility as well, delegate more, ask for help more, and then the partners, supporters, spouses in our lives step up and do more as well, as women are getting back into the workforce, whether hybrid, in office, or continued remote.
Well, what an amazing conversation this evening. I have to say thank you, Connie and Cindy and Karitha and Julian and Shyamali and Monica and everybody who put this together. What an honor it's been to be your moderator. And with that, let me turn to Jan Pepper, the Mayor of Los Altos, for closing remarks.
Thank you, Judy. Can you hear me okay? Wow, what great stories we heard tonight. This was a wonderful event, and the last of a series sponsored by the Los Altos Celebrates Women's Suffrage Committee. Thank you to our wonderful moderator, Chancellor Judy Miner. That was terrific. Thank you, Julian Guthrie, the author of Alpha Girls. What great stories for us to read and get inspired by. And our panelists, Connie Martinez, Shyamali Singhal, Karitha Coleman, Monica Mallon, and Supervisor Cindy Chavez. Thank you so much. You've all accomplished so much, and it was just so much fun to hear all of your stories tonight. Thank you also to the Los Altos Celebrates Women's Suffrage Committee, Vicki Reeder, Emmy Thurber, Jane Reed, Susan Mingsinger, Connie Hong, Jessica Young, Amy Ellison, Nisa Flygor, and Bryant Bow. We've gone through a number of events this year, and this was the final one, and it's been quite the year. And now that we have a woman vice president, we're on our way, women. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much. What a great event. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Happy birthday, Emmy Thurber.
Bye, Emmy.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Wonderful job. Thank you so much.
You all. Thank you.
Bye.